Okay, so this is John from the Red Dice Diaries here with
Leo from Indyhippo.
Okay, Leo, so if I could just ask you a bit about Indyhippo, what is it?
Indyhippo, it started as a bit of a joke because over the last few years there have been a lot of games designed by people who describe themselves or are described as hippie game designers that kind of write story games that are very different from the traditional tactical games of the kind that TSR and WotC produced. And it's a bit of a joke. I think it's a shame that there are these divisions in the game between trad and indie, whatever. So what I've done with Indyhippo is made a bit of a joke of that. So Indyhippo came out of that, So I design games that might come into that category, story games with emotional content and hard choices and so on. So that's where that comes from, really.
I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of independent games now that are very professional looking in terms of the production quality. I mean, I certainly remember when independent games basically meant like a couple of sheets of paper stapled together in the corner.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at a copy of Intrepid here that I've just bought by John Keyworth, which is very interesting. But looking at the production values of this, it looks like a very professional,
it's fantastic,
very interesting piece of work.
I think two things have happened. First of all, the advance of POD has enabled people who might have struggled to produce their own books in the past, able to do low print runs at a low initial cost, and secondly, the production values of printing have increased, so that you can contact a printer and get a number of demo copies done, which I've done with my title Sci-Fi Bit of Capital, my upcoming game Where the Heart Is. I use a printer in the UK for that. Printed very reasonably, very, very cheap, and very good production values. I'm very impressed. Also, I think people expect more. I think, as you say, gone are the days when an indie game does a Xerox few sheets. Gone are those days because the production values increase. And I think the customer, what the customers want, they don't want something that's just put together in their back bedroom. They want they think if you're a serious professional designer, you should come up with a serious product.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, as people have got less money, everything's becoming a bit more expensive. People are demanding more for their money.
Yes. So gone are the days when you say, I'll produce a book with 300 pages and cost it at 50 quid. You will struggle to sell those, and unless it's being distributed by WotC or one of the other big publishers. So I think that's right. I think people are certainly keen. Since I've been on the stand of the UKRP Design Collective, which I'm part of along with John Keyworth, Keyworth Games, people have come up saying, 10 quid, 7 quid, yeah, great, I have one of those. And I think, they're turning away from stands that have books for £15 and £20, and possibly in the past people charged 15 quid for a book which perhaps could have been sold for £12. But you see, what's happened in the last few years is the recession, and I think the recession has created a step change in customer expectation, because people now, say in supermarkets, you can't charge what you could before, so I think customer expectations say, well, we want something for a tenner, and so if you don't produce your games for a tenner, you're going to struggle.
I mean, I've just been talking to John about the UK Roleplay Design Collective, and he was saying that it's actually a group of people who you publish your own games, where you come together to distribute and sell those games. Is that correct?
That's right, yes. It's something quite radical, I think, what we've done, because in the past there have been design collectives that are quite tightly knit groups and that sort of almost become one publisher. We've been very keen from the outset to put across to people that we have our independent publishing imprints, but we do come together at events like Dragonmeet. And what we're doing really is cooperating, helping each other, promote each other's games. One of the things we do on UK Roleplayers, we have a forum there, hosted forum, is we ask people when they join to say, what are you up to, what projects, and how can we help you? It's not just about ideas for games, it's about production, where can I go to get a limited print run of some kind of token or whatever. So I think you don't have to be a tightly knit block to be able to have this kind of presence. But we aim to have a presence at cons where people come and see us, and they see the brand UKRP Design Collective, and we are keen to put across that brand. And you're looking at a leaflet now that we've produced that says drop by and talk to us. because the idea is that we want people to, when they see the brand, this nice orange on black logo. You
certainly jumps out at you.
It does. It's, I mean, it's lovely. I mean, John Keyworth, who did editing for his own game, designed it. It looks very nice. And Rick, I mean, it's an example of the UK RP Design Collective at work, because somebody said, should we have a leaflet? Yes. All right, what should be on that leaflet? People contributed. Right, now who's going to design it? I'll design it. Now, so we've got a designer, we've got a word person, layout. So we help each other. As I say, the leaflet is an example of that. You know.
So I say it really is a collective effort of a group of people coming together.
Yes. But we still have our own imprint. But the UKRP Design Collective is people can see that label and think, here is the home of good games. You know.
Yeah. So, what games have you got that you would say you're particularly excited about personally?
Okay, well, first of all, talk about my own games, obviously. I have got in mind a series of games that I want to produce over the next 2 to 3 years. As I said earlier, it's very comparatively easy now to print small runs to make demo versions. And indeed, I've done that at Dragonmeet today. I've got some copies of the beta version of my upcoming game, Where the Heart Is, which is a game about atypical family units. I'm currently selling my first published game, Sci-Fi Beta Kappa. That's very exciting because I'm Indyhippo is about producing games with interesting themes, with new kinds of innovative mechanics. Intrepid, I'm tremendously excited about. I think Intrepid will run and run. It was hugely popular on its release and remains, because another thing that we're into in the collective is games where there's a lot more player involvement than in traditional games, and a lot of player-generated content. And the interesting thing about Intrepid is it's a traditional game in the sense it's an adventure path type of game. However, the players create the game as they go along. We've got Squadron UK, which perhaps might come into the more tactical category. Again, it's been designed by Simon with an idea that, let's have some new mechanics, let's look at things in a different way. Marcus of Carrara, a game produced by the designers of Witch. That's based on the Marcus of Carrara being assassinated in the 15th century and various people jostling for power. So there's lots going on, and I would definitely encourage people to look at our WordPress blog, where we have each of us has a page to see what's coming up.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that under the when I post this up.
Okay, yeah. So there's lots of interesting things, and I think all of us have ideas for new games which we're going to push over the next year. So keep an eye on the site.
I mean, I think one of the nice things about the independent games is, as you say, you can explore slightly more esoteric themes rather than the bigger companies, which tend to stick to only what they know is going to profit the mainstream.
I think also, in fairness to the big companies, they have a big fan base that wants certain things, and woe betide them if they stray from that. As we saw with D&D 4th Ed, there's a lesson to everybody.
Well, yes, yeah.
They've recovered from that, but I think we don't suffer from that sort of thing. Our fan base wants different and unusual things, so that is really a benefit for us, and I think we, the traditional companies, don't have that advantage that we have.
I certainly think you mentioned earlier that your games have a more sort of player involvement and more sort of a collaborative effort, rather than having the games master handing down everything.
Viking hat, this happens to you, roll dice and so on.
There does seem to be a movement more towards that, certainly in independent games, towards having more player involvement in creating the narrative. Do you think that's something that's going to be reflected more in the mainstream model?
Now, this is interesting. One of the things I'm very interested about in the current, development and publication of various games, both indie and trad, is that we've seen, you've probably come across this word Trindy, which people have been sort of spraying about as a mixture of trad and indie. And I look at it, I can see a sort of Hegelian approach, sort of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So D&D saves the thesis, Fiasco was the antithesis, and things like Fate and PDQ, merge. And I think what we're going to see is more perhaps traditional games, tactical games, involving players more, having more narrative content, like you get Fate with the aspects, PDQ with the more descriptive qualities rather than the stats. I think possibly there will be emerging, yes. Quite how far that will go, I don't know, because there are some people in the fan base of traditional games that will perhaps not go for the extreme of player involvement, and indeed there are players in the story game a fan base that perhaps won't go for games that have more traditional stats. So I think it will happen, but
I've certainly noticed it in terms of obviously, to use an example, Dungeon World by Sage Cobalt.
Good example, yes.
Written as D&D but without the complex rules.
Yes, exactly.
And I think looking at the latest edition of D&D, the 5th edition that's just come out, there's a lot of, it reflects a lot of that similar ideas. It's almost as though Dungeon World's come out of Dungeons and Dragons and it's been folded back into the track.
I think the best example I can think of that is 13th Age, because I'm not a huge fan of D20. I'll happily play a game of D&D and Pathfinder if a GM is running, and it looks like an interesting story. I'm at heart a story gamer, and I tend not to play the more tactical games. However, I do respect them. Now, when 13th Age came out, one of my gamer buddies, who also is a trad gamer, but also isn't that keen on D20 for a storyteller and so on, he said, "This is amazing." I thought, "Wow, is it really? Is it just another D&D clone?"
Yes.
I played it and I was impressed because you got the one unique thing, the icons, and I think they've really gone for a game that's going to keep the D20ers, but also going to appeal to some of the more narrative-based games like myself. And so I think that is happening, definitely.
Yeah, I can certainly see, obviously, the influence of D&D, and it's built around that core. But as you say, they've really sort of built in some very story-based mechanics into it.
Absolutely. I mean, I was playing in a game recently run by the gamer buddy I mentioned just moments ago, and we had a wonderful time. And one of the players was detailing his I think relationship with his icon and how he's going to bring in that scene, and it really kind of almost stumped the GM, because the GM was kind of quite not a Viking hat GM, but it was, this is going to happen, and the player threw some, this is what's going to happen, and the GM said, "Well, all right then, that's what's going to happen. Let's see what happens." And I think that's very interesting.
I mean, I think one of the more interesting things for myself, so I'm a big fan of sort of more collaborative games myself, is that it's easier for maybe people who aren't so sort of enmeshed in traditional players to get into. So if you showed someone like an old D&D book and said, "This is what we're going to be doing," there's a lot you have to sort of slog through and get accustomed to.
There's a lot of investment.
It's a big old investment of time, whereas I think a lot of the more narrative games now, they're easier to pick up and sort of run with straight off the bat.
Yes. I think there's still some resistance in some quarters from people who think they're perhaps a bit easy to design, and so I think, that may be the case, because obviously if you're doing a big adventure path game, you're going to be looking at a big, stodgy rule book, and it's going to take a long time to play it. So I think the narrative game designers do, again, have an advantage in that it's relatively simple to come up with rules, and you won't need so many playtests, But I think there is emerging, yes, definitely.
Okay, that's brilliant. So I think that's about all for us. If there's anything else you'd like to say, any plugs you'd like to give for your...
No, all I can say, do look on the UKLP Collective Design Collective website, do contact us, through the blog, or our, where we are on Facebook or G+ and Twitter, and let us know what ideas you've got and any ideas for games that you might want us to come up with.
And we'll put links to all of that on this podcast.
That's great. Thank you
very much for speaking to us.
Thank you very much. Cheers.